Kia ora, Aotearoa, and hello world. You are listening to the Yeah Nah podcast, the official podcast of the New Zealand Skeptics. I'm Bronwyn Rideout, and with me again this week are Mark Honeychurch.
Hey.
Katrina Borthwick.
Hello.
And we have a special guest returning for what? I think it's your third go-around? Second go-around? Second go-around on the podcast. We have the wonderful Aaron Davies. Welcome back, Aaron.
Well, I've got a lot to live up to now. I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me back. Very proud to be here.
Don't ruin it. You'll never come back again.
After what this podcast has been through, that would be a difficult ask, but I'll do my very best, Mark. Anything for you.
Oh, so kind.
Mark will be the deciding factor on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Rule with an iron fist.
So, in this episode, Mark, you're going to tell us about a new exercise fad called Scientology Runs. Mm-hmm. I'll be taking everyone on a bit of a Yeti hunt. And Katrina is going to prove that what is old is always going to be new again, when a retired NASA employee has claimed that sky photographs taken all the way back in the 1950s could have evidence of a non-human technology in our skies, way before the age of the satellite. But before we get into that, Mark, Aaron, you have a very special pamphlet to discuss.
We do. I wouldn't say proud, but I'm proud to be now disassociated from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And while I'm not heavily engaged, I do keep tabs on the ex-Jehovah's Witness community. And something interesting I uncovered, and of course immediately shared with Mark, is someone has produced a pamphlet or a brochure or a booklet that's anti-Jehovah's Witness in the exact perfect style of their Jehovah's Witness booklets, with the same cringe artwork that's bizarre, that's been with them since about the 1960s. And it's, well, the content of course is a highlight. It's just so perfectly replicating their style. And I just thought that was really, really cool. And it's also a very interesting read. Hey, Mark.
Yeah, as you say, like the way it's been put together, like it's a watchtower or what are the other pamphlets that they have?
They have like the one-off campaigns every 2 or 3 years when they've got to distribute as many of them as possible. And of course, these days, I think they don't so much give out physical brochures as they try to give out digital versions somehow.
The text it's a bunch of kind of reasoned argument about why you maybe shouldn't necessarily trust the leaders of the Jehovah's Witnesses and how they've been wrong before, but also it's backed up by Bible quotes, which really tickled me, like the idea of using Bible quotes against a religious organization, and then also quotes from elders. So they'd been looking through the history of the Watchtower and many pronouncements, and they had their receipts, they had the evidence they needed to back it up. And it's a guy called Lloyd Evans, for anybody has dived into ex-Jehovah's Witnesses communities before, who does some really good ex-JW videos ever since. I think it's been quite a few years since he's left.
It's been a very long time, but after doing a deep dive, I've done one long before and one now, there are so many different sects and different groups of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. They seem to congregate together, and there's a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that of course are very anti-Lloyd Evans and say he's a exploitive authority, but I don't tend to get into that. He seems to do a very good job of refuting evidence, both biblically and both factually, and it's often very interesting, and this seems like the culmination of all his work.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was interesting about the Bible quotes was that in my article I went off on a tangent of, hey, this is cool, I wonder what other skeptical Bible verses there are that tell people to be skeptical and question things and not just take things on face value. And so I found a bunch of quotes, and it turns out, along with the quotes that Lloyd was using, pretty much everything that I could find in the Bible that sounds skeptical, you only have to read a few verses either before or after, and you get to some very unskeptical stuff. So my article was mainly just a list of cool Bible verses that seem to support the idea that people should question things and not be gullible. And the way to test whether something's true is by asking your Lord to let you know. Or the way to figure out whether this person is genuine is he preaching that Jesus came to earth and died and was resurrected? Because if they believe that, you should just blindly trust them. And all the skeptical verses were just undone by something that was like 20 words away from that phrase. It was really unfortunate. There wasn't even one that stood up to scrutiny.
I have to say, like, if you were a little bit more business-minded, Mark, you could actually create and market a special set of Bibles called the Skeptic's Bible. I'm sure there'd be plenty of Christians who would want to buy a Bible where they can take out and say, here's what this line says about questioning things.
There might be plenty of people that would be interested. There wouldn't be much Bible left if I only left the skeptical bits in. I think 99.9% would be gone. I suppose there's neutral bits, right? There's a whole bunch of genealogy, like such and such begat such and such. That would survive, but yeah, I think a lot of it would just have to go. And I'd love to get rid of a lot of it. There's a lot of inhumane, cruel stuff that happens in the Bible. Things that even, like, when I was a Christian, I'd look at and I'd be like, I can't justify this. Like, slaughtering entire communities in the name of God, and God was pleased that it happened. This is not nice stuff.
It's not always nice. It's also very interesting to show how the Bible does seem to say, beware of imposters. And I know that, like, that's often a thing that's brought up a lot of times, but of course it doesn't really give any advice of how to watch out for imposters. It just says look out for them and almost don't use your instincts. Listen to what's written here and take that as fact, which seems to be a bit of a circular reasoning.
Yeah, the whole trusting your leadership thing, the idea that the elders are to be trusted, you just have to blindly accept what they're saying. Obviously it's in the church's best interest to say that, but I think as skeptics, we have a very different worldview, a very different mindset. It's no, question everything within reason and using science and accepting evidence when it's there, but nothing should be a sacred cow. Everything should be up for good, honest debate. But yeah, the church is not preaching that. Like, the elders are saying, no, just trust us.
There's the infamous Jehovah's Witness 2 witness rule. I forget which Bible passage they based it off, but if something like, unfortunately, child abuse or any nefarious themes, even criminal exploits, don't have 2 witnesses, then it doesn't seem to be very credible and isn't taken up by the judiciary process, whatever that might be, which seems a bit alarming because you can have a lot better evidence than witnesses.
Yeah, and it's
circumstances. I'm sure everybody's, not avoiding people at all.
It's not just the Jehovah's Witnesses as well. The recent stuff I've been doing, watching Mike Winger, this very conservative YouTuber who's been tearing down other evangelicals. He's the same. He, for all the ideas he's got that seem to be very ethical, he still seems to stick with that idea that it's 2 witnesses, but he's worked out a bunch of different ways that 1 witness can become 2 witnesses, and like he's juggling in his mind, but he still feels like he has to stick with that biblical principle. And it's no, we have secular courts and laws, and we've figured this out a lot better than the Bible did 2,000 years ago.
Can you make 1 person 2 people? You're going to have to explain that to me.
Rape is the classic. Like Aaron was talking about child abuse, but rape as well. It's, you won't generally be raped in front of somebody else. This is something that somebody will do in private when they're not going to be found out. So 2 witnesses is just an impossible standard when these things happen. So it's obviously not ethical, whether it's biblical or not.
I think something that has been pointed out a lot of times is they do flex these rules and try to avoid anything that might lead to a negative perspective of the Jehovah's Witnesses from the secular basis. It's interesting though, because if you did want to have a skeptic's Bible about certain denominations or even all denominations, well, you just look up every other Christian denomination and taking that denomination, find why that's wrong. Then you find the next one and look them all up for that one. And surely if you looked up all of them and found all of them, then you'd just collate them together, then you'd have a refute of every denomination and you'd have it all done.
Nice. Just let them fight amongst themselves until nobody's left. I love it.
Yeah, we just sit there and watch the fighting and enjoy it.
So I'm still in the middle of my deep dive on Mormonism, and I only found out yesterday while listening to this apologetics podcast for Mormonism that Joseph Smith retranslated the Bible. So not only did he have his Book of Mormon, but there is an official Joseph Smith version of the Bible. The only problem being, at the time that he did it, he could not read Hebrew or Greek. So he just trusted that God would tell him what was wrong and how to fix it. So he was just winging it like he did with the Book of Mormon, basically just reading the Bible and going, oh, I don't like that bit. No, that's got to go. God didn't mean that. And, oh, I'm going to add like 20 verses to this bit to explain what's going on.
Don't you still got those special Mormon underwear?
I do have.
So,
yeah, not only, Aaron, did you buy me a colonic irrigation, you also bought me Mormon underwear, which is particularly fetching, I have to say.
So if you're wearing those Mormon underwear, and nothing but the Mormon underwear, you can't get it tainted, then you'll be inspired. Then you'll be able to translate Hebrew and Greek and get the true empowerment. But the second you put clothes back on, you're back to being terrible.
So you're saying for me to do my best work 8 hours a day, I need to be sitting in the office in just my Mormon underwear because it will help to inspire me to be my best self?
As much as I'd like you to do that, I don't want to see pictures of it.
Fair enough.
We won't start putting our bodies on YouTube.
You've got to be skeptical.
With Mark sitting there in his Mormon underwear.
You've got to test it out, though. How can you say it's not true if you're not trying it out, Mark? You've got to wear your skeptic badge proud and walk around in your undies for a few weeks and see how inspired you are from the Mormon God.
I think we can just give him like some tests on like Hebrew. That's all we need to do.
This Mormon underwear is very conservative. It comes down to the knees and it's got sleeves. It covers pretty much everything. So I don't think you need to be too worried if I wear it on the podcast.
Well,
so it's like thermal underwear, like, sort of that old tramping or, that kind of stuff.
It looks a lot like thermals, but it has 5 secret symbols sewn into it. That's what gives it the magic, which apparently, according to some Mormons, does cool stuff like allowing people to survive car crashes and stuff like that.
That's a skeptical thing you could do, Mark. Put your undies on
and get in a car crash.
And that'll be a good test. If you survive, then it's proven.
I think Aaron's trying to take over my spot on the podcast here. Oh, go and get in a car crash.
Yeah, and get another colonic at the same time, and that will double the power. You'll have immortality forever.
But I guess that's something that could be easily falsifiable if the Mormon police, or anywhere where they have a significant Mormon population, were recording if people were wearing their special underwear. And they were in a vehicular accident.
Yeah, I imagine that's privileged church information, and they probably deliberately don't collate that.
Probably selectively. Oh, he was wearing a watch while he was wearing his underwear, so that's why, Yeah.
For the record, despite what Aaron says, it's not just the underwear. The people that claim that it is doing magical things, they do wear clothes over the top, and this underwear is still supposed to be magical.
It sounds really witchy, having symbols sewn into it and all of that kind of stuff, honestly.
Masonic, apparently, is the origins. It's like a right angle and things like that. So it's 5 Masonic symbols.
But that's interesting that you mentioned the witchiness of it, because there was a bit of a trend on TikTok a few months ago where people are doing all this like sort of blessing stuff and saying, oh, I'm going to use the blood of Christ. But instead of the blood of Christ, they're using cranberry juice. And, just the commentary coming from both Christian talk and from witch talk saying that what you're doing is kind of closer to witchcraft than anything biblical, like in terms of protecting their homes from demons and demonic forces.
Normally you're supposed to use wine.
Well, if they're non-alcoholic, right? Then why would they have wine? Cranberry juice or grape juice is a legitimate
I think it's a perfect excuse to have wine, is to build it into your religion somehow so that you have this blood of Christ.
Well, the Catholics agree with you there, but not many evangelicals.
Yeah, but they do drink beyond communion, pretty sure.
Oh, yeah. Alrighty, now Mark, you don't get to run away just yet. You may have the hottest new running club happening in LA called Scientology Runs. So why don't you tell us a little bit more, and do skeptics need to start lacing up?
Yeah, so this, I am happy to report, is another instance of me farming articles from my children, getting them to go on social media and then let me know what they find out. And this one I nearly missed. My daughter just mentioned it really quickly in passing, and it was like, whoa, hang on a bit. Please expand on what a Scientology run is. Because my first thought, as I wrote in my article, was that there are people that boast about how quickly they can progress through Scientology. Bronwyn, have you seen before the Bridge to Total Freedom? Have you seen the big poster that they have? I can't remember whether you've been to a Scientology place.
I haven't been to a Scientology place, but at the National Library, they actually have like a large format like one of the posters that they had back in the 60s and 70s, so back when the Bridge to Total Freedom was a little bit smaller, a little bit of a shorter journey. But yeah, they have a large format one, which is actually kind of cool to look at. That's in their archives.
Nice. So yeah, it's a series of courses and a detox and other things that you need to do.
There's also a musical album with John Travolta.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's also called The Bridge to Total Freedom. I mean, it's one of the many different musical project of the Church of Scientology.
God, I'd forgotten about that, but it is truly horrific music. So yeah, go and look up Scientology music on YouTube if you want to cringe, basically.
It's not all bad. It's not all bad. Like, I mean, they had a pretty good early electronica band that was really, really good. And there's a fun picture where, like, here's L. Ron Hubbard in the middle. And, like, there's all these musicians who are looking a little bit down.
You wrote about that for our musical episode, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, these are musicians who are being worked to the bone, but at least they're not doing Sea Org shit. So they do become quite proficient. They're really good. I think the Sea Org band was, like, really kind of like this rock, funky jazz kind of genre of music. It was good. I will say it's good. But the Bridge to Total Freedom, which I'm pretty much 80s schlock with John Travolta, not so good.
So you mentioned the Sea Org shit, and for those not in the know, like Scientology, obviously most people are aware now, thankfully, it's an abusive, horrible religion that is only a religion for tax purposes. It's made by L. Ron Hubbard, who was a science fiction author, so it's got a heavy dose of sci-fi and like bad pseudo-scientific imaginings, and it takes people's money and it gets them to do stupid stuff, and it punishes them in horrible ways if they aren't doing it right. And then you have this next level, the Sea Org, where you sign a billion-year contract because they believe in reincarnation. So they believe that you can sign a contract and keep working for Scientology when you're reborn in 50 or 100 years. And there you can go and work on the Free Winds and be used like slave labor on their lovely cruise ship. And it's like, the more you get into it, the more horrible it sounds. Like, lots and lots of rules, lots of other people who are arbitrarily telling you what to do all the time and nitpicking your work. It's horrific, and you're not even getting anything positive out of it. Like, the ideas that L. Ron Hubbard had about going clear, which is clearing your cellular engrams, which are like bad memories that are supposed to be saved at a cellular level, which in reality turn out to be related to the souls of Thetans, which are aliens that were brought to Earth and killed in volcanoes. The whole thing is just batshit, really. So over the top stupid. But it, like any cult like this, when you get in, you don't hear all of this. You only hear like if you keep doing this, maybe you won't need to wear glasses anymore, because when people get to clear, their vision gets better. And little by little, it's the frog boiling. You don't notice that it's getting crazier and crazier, or you do, but by this point, you're already basically committed to it, and your family know that you're in it, and it's really hard to admit that you made a big mistake. Some people dive in with both feet, and they are really quick to do courses. And I mentioned in my article Jason Begay. There's a really good article from him from 15 years ago or something. I think it might have been done as part of the background to the Alex Gibney film. But he basically, and it's really interesting to listen to it because he uses a lot of the internal language of Scientology. And you'll notice if Scientologist how much he's dropping that internal language. And if you aren't familiar with Scientology, you'll notice because there's a whole bunch of words that don't make sense. Because L. Ron Hubbard liked to use words in the wrong context. He'd make up a new context for what this word means to Scientology. Yeah, so he boasted that he was really good, and I think practically it was because he had a lot of money. Because he had a lot of money, he was able to progress really quickly to the state of clear and beyond. And so I thought maybe this is the Scientology run, and my daughter disabused me of this idea. It doesn't make much sense anyway, because it would be horribly expensive to work through Scientology quickly, and it's not going to be a very engaging TikTok video. What is a really easy to make TikTok video that people seem to like watching, basically people running into a Scientology center, filming themselves or being filmed by someone behind them, and seeing how far into the center they can get before they get caught and ejected from the building. And when I watched the videos, I very quickly noticed, which is really unfortunate for this one place, that it's one center, sorry, not the Celebrity Center, but it's the Hollywood Boulevard Scientology Center, seems to be being picked on. that a bunch of people are just running into this building, like ducking under people's arms as they try and catch them, and running through the corridors and seeing how far they can get. And that's the totality of it, basically. This is the trend, and there don't seem to be that many people that have done it. This is not something that hundreds of people are doing. It might be half a dozen or a dozen people have filmed themselves doing it. Some of them are coming out with inventive ways of getting away with it, like skateboarding in front of the Scientology Center and then leaping off the skateboard to go through the door at the last second. And you can tell the staff have had enough of it. Like in the videos, the staff do not look impressed that this is happening. But it's really hard to have sympathy for them when they're Scientologists. They are abusing people physically and mentally and taking tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of people's money that they can't afford. So it's really hard to have sympathy for them that they're having to put up with these teens doing this.
I mean, this is kind of one of those things where maybe faster is not the better way to go about the sport. Maybe they have to do speed walking. Because if they're running away and hootering and hollering and all that stuff, like, people are going to stop them. But maybe if they walk through, or they had multiple people sort of act as, like, points of distraction, they could probably get a lot further. You know?
Tell you what, even better, if they put on a waistcoat like the Scientologists wear and do the whole outfit, possibly they could walk in and just have free reign of the place. That's a really good idea. Look like you belong there. Maybe have a clipboard and try and look as efficient as you can, and you might be able to get a good distance in. But yeah, so the videos that I watched, a bunch of them, they had so much misinformation, like that the back of this center is like Area 51, or that it's got a whole bunch of celebrity secrets, that somebody who did this run has never been seen again, like Scientology has disappeared them. None of this is true. This place is not the celebrity center, so it doesn't have any celebrity stuff. The celebrities have a separate building in Hollywood that is very nice, but this building on Hollywood Boulevard, it gets a lot of foot traffic because it's on Hollywood Boulevard, but it's an outreach center. It's a center where they're trying to get people in to the building to try and get them interested in Scientology. And this Scientology even has a term for this, body rooting. And body rooting is rooting someone's physical body into a Scientology center. And this is one of L. Ron Hubbard's many, let's just take words and make them mean something new. I think part of why it's
those
called
words
that,
already probably mean something else.
Exactly, yeah.
The worrying thing about words here is, just looking through your article, you mentioned the runs a lot. And I think the solution that people might get from skim reading this is that Scientology gives you the runs, which could actually be a great campaign. It could be a way, if there's misinformation coming out of it, that would be the best thing to have.
Yeah, get people to stay away from Scientology because they don't want diarrhea. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work. But yeah, so basically there is nothing nefarious in here. They want you to go in there. I at one point had a little love affair with Scientology. I was never a member because it cost like $500 a year, but I used to go to events until they found out who I was. And one of the events I went to as part of the month-long L. Ron Hubbard celebrations was watching a video where they reported statistics from every ideal org in the world. An ideal org is like L. Ron Hubbard once wrote a little note in his scrawly handwriting that said, in an unideal organization or an ideal building, people would be milling around all the time busy. Nobody would be sitting around doing nothing. It would have a great library. It would have this. It would have that. And this has been turned by Scientology into this rule that this is what they need to do. They need to build ideal orgs around the world. And so it's really weird to see them doing this. But basically, yeah, so for this building, there is not much going on except for getting people in. So that video I watched, basically, they would say this ideal org has had 3,000% increase in the number of leaflets they handed out. And this other ideal org in Brazil has had 175% increase in body rooting, which is getting people into the building. So that's what they're doing. They are trying to advertise the religion here. They're trying to get people in. Obviously, they don't want rowdy teens to be running in and making a nuisance of themselves, but the kind of stuff that's going to be in there is there's going to be a bookstore where you can buy books and CDs and other things from L. Ron Hubbard. There's going to be a cinema where they have an intro movie to Scientology, and they'll want you to watch that. There'll be somewhere that you can sit down and do their questionnaire, because one of their hooks that they get people in is their personality test. I think it's the Oxford something personality test. Not a legitimate test. I took it way back in the late 90s. Universally, if you take the test, they will tell you that you have psychological problems. You do the test, there is something wrong, they have pretty graphs that show you what's wrong, and of course they have some courses they can sell you which will help correct that. There's always a Scientology course that will fix any personality issue. So yeah, so that's what's going on, basically. It's kids are annoying Scientology. I have no sympathy for Scientologists at all, so I'm okay with it happening, but I could only find it happening in this one centre. I would like to see someone trying it in Auckland. I can't imagine there are many staff left in our Auckland Ideal Org, because we do have one Ideal Org in New Zealand. Scientology a few years ago purchased a really nice building in Auckland. But if you really want to see the inside of a Scientology centre, as I said in my article, don't run in there like a hoon. Go in and ask to have a look around. Ask if they can give you a tour. And in the Auckland one, you can even go online and book a tour. But if you just walk in and ask, look genuinely interested, act like you're oblivious to what Scientology is, or maybe like you're a bit of a rebel and you don't believe all the bad publicity you've heard, they will be more than happy to show you around, I'm pretty sure. Like, they've got an amazing building, they like to show it off. Myself and Craig and Robin all went and visited on the open day they had, like the grand opening day of the building, and that was really good fun. And we got to see a whole bunch of stuff. There's not really anything secret there, except for the auditing records, all the private stuff people have said that has been written down during their auditing, where they're clearing those bad engrams, those cellular memories that are traumatizing them. That's all kept behind a locked door. Apparently it's used sometimes as blackmail. Apparently sometimes people are told, if you leave the church, we'll release some of those deepest, darkest secrets you've told us.
I wonder how old some of those files are, because when I was doing my piece about Scientology in New Zealand, there was an incident sort of in the late 60s, early 70s, where the then leaders of Scientology, or their ambassadors or their representatives who came from the UK, they kind of got into some trouble with the government. I think this is around the time of the Dumbleton Powell inquiry. And yeah, they decided to burn a lot of those files. Or at least they made a big show of burning a lot of the personnel files that they had. They invited all the journalists to come in and take photos and take a look at the files and see what was in there. Now, whether those files are, just copies, or whether they're originals and they kept the copies, I don't know. I'm interested in knowing, how old those files are at Scientology.
Yeah, I imagine they keep everything. That seems to be the experience of quite a few people that have left, is that their entire auditing history is stored somewhere. And certainly at the open day in Auckland, if you go in through the main doors in the courtyard, take a left, there's the bookstore. And then on the other end of the bookstore, there is a locked door that just has a whole bunch of shelves full of files. And in my mind, that's where it all is, basically.
Can't you?
I can pick lots.
So we just need to distract the staff with a bunch of unruly teenagers, and then we're in.
So while the kids are doing the Scientology run, from what it looked like, there were a lot of files there. I guess maybe we could look for particular people that we might be interested in their history. Some of the more vocal and supportive Scientologists in this country, and there are a few, like Nigel Anthony Gray would be a really good start for me, and the guy Sheris, I think, would be interesting, and possibly there's a doctor in Auckland as well. She got in trouble because she used her patient list and emailed out all her patients to invite them to the open day of the new building, and the medical council said, no, that's not what your patient list is for. You can't go inviting people to your cult just because they use you as a doctor. But yeah, when we were there, we actually bumped into a couple of people that were patients of hers, and they were like, we don't believe any of it, but we just thought it was hilarious that she got in trouble for inviting us, so we figured we'd come along and have a look.
That's a good attitude. But, what about your own file, Mark?
Yeah, my biggest disappointment with Scientology, I had a little bit of fun. I handed leaflets out for them for a day, and I went and watched some videos and had some social events. My biggest disappointment was that when I was found out and they ceased contact with me, I don't think I was made a suppressive person. So the idea is that the enemies of Scientology are called SPs, or suppressive people. And this is a badge of honor for anybody that wants to annoy Scientology, that you're seen as so bad that you negatively influence other people. And L. Ron Hubbard basically said at one point, no holds barred. He was like, any way that you can attack an SP, any way that you can take down an SP, legal or illegal, is fine in the eyes of the church, basically. They are our mortal enemy, and we need to destroy them. And I want to be labeled an SP, and I'm not sure if I am. I don't think I am, but it would be really nice to have that badge of honor. And I don't think I made it.
I think you'd have to be like influencing the others to kind of turn like causing some havoc, whereas you weren't really doing that. You weren't putting members off.
I don't know. I ended up going on national radio and talking about it. Maybe I did an okay job.
Yeah, I think if you got internally and started playing politics, you'd definitely get that label.
How many runs into a building would you have to do before you got on that list?
I think you just get arrested. Really. They can trespass you.
Yeah, I imagine you'd have to do a run and accidentally drop your identification so they knew who you were. Otherwise, they're going to have no clue.
That does sound like something you would do to try to get on the list, so maybe put that in your pocket.
Unless, of course, we started a TikTok channel, and then we'd all get on the list because we'd be posting the videos up. But, Mark, here's another purpose for your children. You sort of send them as decoys.
Send them in to do the Scientology runs. Oh.
Well, no, they send them in first. And then as they keep on taking up the time of all the different staff members, then you can go and run, jog, walk, crawl, use your walker.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, use your walker, Mike. That would be great, I'm sure.
I'm not that old yet, but it is coming.
It's an impressive person, and his entire family has their photos on our door, so...
That would be awesome if it was like Shoplifters and they had my picture at the front door. Do not let this man in.
Well, it seems that, when looking at those videos from the Scientology audit, the Celebrity Center does know the TikToker or the camera person pretty well if they are always shutting the door whenever they see him.
Yeah, and that's a thing I saw, looking for more than the few videos that I could find. The other videos I found about the Hollywood Boulevard Center were people who were just walking past and known to the staff. They would either go up asking questions of the staff, or they'd go up and shout abuse at them. I think a few people have been hurt pretty badly by Scientology, but there were so many videos of people holding a mobile phone and recording and walking up to the doors, and the staff just fold in through the doors and close them behind them and lock them. It's like an established drill that they've got to shut up shop as soon as a problematic person turns up. So the runs are new, but having problems at that Hollywood Boulevard Center, that is not new. It looks like they've been dealing with rowdy people for many years now.
I wonder what's like in their Florida, what's it, Clearwater? Their Clearwater location? I wonder if it's the same sort of deal.
Yeah, so that head office, and they almost own the whole town. It's like Mormons in Utah. I think the Scientologists in Clearwater, Florida, a lot of the police are Scientologists, and a lot of the shops are run by Scientologists. So it's pretty much a Scientology town. So I'm not sure you'd be able to get very far, and I'm not sure you'd find many sympathetic people if you tried to get into their administrative offices. And I bet it's way more locked down than anywhere else. Oh, apart from, they've got some other places that are out in the desert and have barbed wire fences and 24-hour security. Those are weird. They're the places where they send people who are members who've been the worst but still want to be members. So they send them into these places for punishment, where they might have to dig holes for 12 hours every day and fill them in again, and then dig them and fill them in, or go out running at night in the forest or something like this. There's a whole bunch of weird and wonderful, really abusive punishments that the staff have come out with, and especially I think David Miscavige. If you read about him, he's the new leader since L. Ron Hubbard finished. He seems to have a really mean streak about him, and the senior leaders that fell afoul of him would be punished in horrible ways, and then made to all sleep in the same little trailer for the night, and then the next day they're up early in the morning, no food and digging holes again, or sometimes he got people to physically have fights with each other. He'd tell people basically, you are fighting you, and he'd just stand there and watch it.
Well, one of the people who fell afoul of David Miscavige was David Mayo, who was a Kiwi. He was a very early member of the New Zealand Church of Scientology in Auckland, and he kind of got up the ranks pretty high. And when L. Ron Hubbard died, I think it was kind of thought that maybe David was in line to take over, but it ended up being Miscavige. And yeah, Miscavige sent him to a special camp, which ended up getting the name as Happy Valley Runners Club. And he was one of those people who was running all day. Eventually, he was able to leave, but it's one of those things that I guess sort of boggles people who are outside of the cult is why do organizations feel that they have the right to corporal punishment when really they don't have that legal right to do that?
Yeah, but when it's a religion or a cult and they feel like they are in charge of your eternal soul and they own you, you can see it's more likely that organizations get like this. And that whole period when David Miscavige took over the church, that sounds fascinating. But that was a period where I don't think anybody expected Miscavige to take over, but he had some power plays and some sneaky tactics, and he got himself made into the new leader, and then it was a purge. Basically, anybody that had been against him, anybody that he was worried wouldn't toe the party line, as you say, that he punished them and he got rid of them. And it was ruthless.
There is a book, and it's called A Piece of Blue Sky. And it was a 1990 book, which was a kind of about the development of Dianetics and Scientology, written by John Attack. Or ATAC. He's been sort of in social media lately. So yeah, there have been books that have kind of looked at that like early period.
Okay.
Just out of interest, what is the punishment regime for the New Zealand skeptics? Is that something that you want to disclose up front? Is there any secrets we should share there? Because I don't think it's fair that we attack them without disclosing what you guys
I think
do.
you have to write a newsletter article and then you get called on the podcast.
Oh.
And then if you're really bad, you end up being a host on the podcast.
Yeah.
Because this is New Zealand and we're slightly more civilized, we do actually have a complaints process and a disciplinary process, and it's all very staid and boring. And potentially, yes, one of the conclusions is that, well, you don't have to pay us money anymore to be a member.
I'd never got the option to run through a forest at night rather than do this. I didn't get any choice in the matter. Seems a lot more harsh.
I'm pretty sure I asked you and didn't tell you. I'm pretty sure I was polite about it, but I'll go back through our messages and double check just in case.
I'm very happy to be here, Mark, and you know that. Thank you very much.
Oh, God, no, don't thank us. That just sounds weird.
Thank him more. He hates it.
Oh,
Now it's starting to sound like we are in a cult. Stop it.
Yeah, but isn't Mark amazing? We should all talk about how amazing he is.
No.
Oh, no, that's the next podcast coming, sorry.
Stop it.
You can edit out my laughing later. I think.
No, we need more. That's the other thing for the podcast. We could have a laugh track, which would improve things greatly.
It would just be you, Aaron, because you're the only person who laughs at us.
Okay, I'll be the constant guest star and I'll just sit here and giggle the whole time.
Well, maybe one episode, we can have a special episode where we just do an hour of laughter yoga. Literally just us forcing ourselves to laugh for an hour. That would be excruciatingly painful for people to listen to. I'd be tempted.
You sound like happy that it would be painful for people, so it shows your demeanour.
All right. Thank you for that, Mark. Now, my piece is a little bit more for the armchair mountaineer. I don't think people know this about me, but I am morbidly fascinated with Mount Everest. I'm always interested in how people organize those big treks and expeditions, how the economy and the industry that's around Mount Everest is changing. But also, I am interested in Sir Edmund Hillary because in his early life, before he climbed Mount Everest, he was a member of the School of Radiant Living, which is a health fad / religious group, maybe a cult, maybe not. That's a group I'm researching behind the scenes for a bigger project. And of course, Sir Edmund Hillary and his family were involved in that group. And Sir Edmund Hillary was even being trained to be a high-level teacher. But he gave it up after a few years. I think by the time World War II came around, he wanted to go fight in the war. And Herbert Sutcliffe, who ran the school, was more of a pacifist. Eventually, Hillary and his family split ways for various reasons. So, 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary summits Mount Everest. Hooray, hurrah. In 1958, him and a British physiologist and mountaineer named Griffith Pugh questioned whether you could actually summit Mount Everest without oxygen. Without supplemental oxygen, I should say. You need oxygen to climb, you need oxygen to live, but yeah, supplemental oxygen, like the special canisters and stuff. And what they hypothesized is that it could be possible if, rather than acclimatizing over a few weeks, you're actually spending several months at 20,000 feet acclimatizing. It's like 6-7 months. And Everest is about 29,000 feet. So Hillary thought, yep, that's quite possible. However, he acknowledged that it was actually going to be quite expensive because in his first summit, I think it was estimated that it cost between 15,000 to 30,000 pounds. Now, of course, it's 1950, and that's still actually quite a lot of money to do anything at that time. And cost was just one of many, many barriers to going up and doing this experiment. By the time they actually got the expedition off the ground in 1960, only about 7 other people across 3 different expeditions actually summited Mount Everest. It was still quite a difficult, physically grueling and difficult task. Don't have the industry of Sherpas and established camps as you do today. And those are only the expeditions that we know about. I can't say or make any comments about any sneaky expeditions that people made on the sly or, under government radar. So his new estimate to be able to sort of winter for 6-7 months at 20,000 feet would be about $120,000 USD that he estimated. Another obstacle to this trek was diplomatic. The Chinese government had declined Hillary and Pugh's request to establish bases. And, if you know anything about history and politics, there's pretty good reason why. Tibet had been annexed by China in 1950, 1951. And, there's lots of conflict going on about their border. They did sign an agreement about maintaining quote unquote friendly relations. But also China had its own sights set on Everest. In about 1957, they sent a group of athletes over to Russia in order to learn mountaineering. And then the Russians, or the Soviet Union at the time, approached these athletes and said, hey, let's do a joint trek up Mount Everest. Now, that was supposed to happen in about, 1959? But it ended up getting postponed to 1960 because of the Tibetan uprising. And then, getting it done by 1960 was also quite politically important for China because it was about nearing the time of some very important border negotiations between China and Nepal. And so I don't think they really wanted Sir Edmund Hillary taking their glory. Even if they had all these teams on the mountain, Hillary was the one who had the guaranteed success. But this joint journey with the Chinese and the Soviet Union didn't occur. Soviet Union withdrew, but the Chinese decided to go ahead. But when the Soviet Union withdrew, they also not only withdrew their manpower, they withdrew all their equipment. So it ended up costing the Chinese about $700,000 to do that mission.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, they had to buy all their equipment from Switzerland, and then they had a 214-person strong crew.
Wow,
like scientists and porters.
Yeah, a lot of support.
Now, I didn't go into it, but the Chinese summit has long been a subject of controversy because they said, yep, we summited Mount Everest, but they didn't provide any evidence. Not until decades later. So for many, many years, they weren't given the credit for that summit. And they were also making claims about climbing cliff faces that were actually far higher than they said they were. I didn't quite look too into it, but there's lots of really unusual claims made with no evidence to back it up. But the current discourse is that, yes, they likely summited, but they just exaggerated the claims as to how quickly they may have summited or all the adventures that happened along the way. But nonetheless, you think 214 people going up that hill is a lot, but Hillary and Pugh actually ended up in the end getting over 300, and that includes Sherpas and porters to go up the hill and bringing stuff up because they brought a lab up, not like a fancy lab that you would see in Cold War movies, but kind of a cabin and a tent. A cabin that had beds and a little stove and a place where they could do some science, what they call the Silver Hut. And that's the name that this expedition eventually got, was the Silver Hut Expedition. So they couldn't climb Everest because of the Chinese government, so they end up shifting the location of their study to a nearby mountain called Makalu, which is shorter than Everest by about 2,000 feet. It's about 27,790 feet, or about 8,470 meters. But they still had this funding issue. So they could still do the experiment. Maybe they're not going as high as Everest, but they'd still get some valuable information, valuable science. But funding was bad. Until 1959. Hillary won this Explorer of the Year award from a magazine called Agassi Magazine, and that came with a $1,000 prize, which was a lot of money in the 1950s. The magazine flew Hillary over to attend a banquet, give a speech, and in that audience was a man called John Deinhardt from World Book Encyclopedia, a very well-known encyclopedia back in the day when you had encyclopedia sets at home. And he was really impressed with Hillary. He thought that he was personable, charming, invited Hillary to come to Chicago. And the story's mixed as to who actually puts out the idea. The Wikipedia page says Hillary put out the idea like, hey, we're going to do a Yeti search while we're also climbing up and doing this really important scientific experiment. A book by Dr. Michael Gill, who was a New Zealand medical student who went up on the Silver Hut expedition with Hillary. He wrote a book later in life. He said it was both Pugh and Hillary who thought of this plan as a way to garner interest. And then I came across another writer named Norman Hardy, who also went up on the mountain, and he was leading the porters ahead to establish that high altitude camp. And he was writing in 1960 saying that it was the idea of the sponsors, John Deinhardt of World Book Encyclopedia and his bosses at Field Enterprises, to tack the Yeti search on. It was an inspired move. It captured the public's attention, and because of that, Hillary and Pugh were able to secure about $125,000 in financial support. There's other things that are attached to the mission that I have come across. They did really good science because of how difficult it is. A lot of the science that they did has not been refuted. It hasn't been replicated. So the textbooks that they wrote or the papers that they wrote following it are still valid today. I also come across claims that they were also watching Chinese rocket launches while they were up on the mountain, but I haven't heard that claim repeated too often. So I can't make any claims to the veracity of that. So, what was it about the Yeti that made it such a great idea for this PR campaign? Rather than sort of focusing on this really cool science. Yeti, long been a part of Tibet's cultural heritage and cultural history, but it really wasn't until the 19th century, when we had more Western explorers going over to the East, that the concept of the Yeti was starting to be embedded in Western culture. I guess the earliest writings that we see about it in Western, in British English media, is in the 19th century, so the 1800s. Obviously, there's no photographs. People are just drawing pictures, or they're describing seeing these unusual footprints in the snow in Nepal. Then in the 20th century, when you actually are getting more mountaineers who are trying to climb all these different mountaintops in Nepal, and they're bringing cameras, we're starting to see more of that photographic evidence coming to light. So, we have Frank Smythe, who took some very famous photos of Yeti's feet in 1937. I think maybe the most famous one, though, was Eric Shipton. He climbed Everest in 1951, and Edmund Hillary was apparently on that expedition. Shipton has taken these really interesting photographs, which I included in the article, but allegedly Hillary claimed to have been suspicious of Shipton's work.
So as to those photos, if anybody wants to go and see them, just go to articles.skeptics.nz, and they are great photos. I absolutely loved seeing, almost too good to be true, could we say, of just how well defined these footprints in the snow are.
Yeah, let's give Hillary the credit, because Hillary looked at these photos and he's like, these kind of look quite different. The photo of the single footprint looks quite different than the other photos of the footprints that are allegedly around it. It looks like a completely different shape. There's a single footprint which looks really defined, look, here's toes, but they're all really in weird positions. And then you have other footprints which look more like hooves. Apparently, yeah, he's Hillary Shipman sort of was a bit vague about it, and Hillary later said, definitely thought it was a hoax. Shipton tended to taking the mickey out of people. He didn't think it was below Shipton to fake this.
Right.
But,
so more for fun than for nefarious purposes then, maybe, if he faked it.
Yeah, but nonetheless, these photos persist. People are still very interested in them. People still study them in terms of what these footprints might tell us about whatever mythical creature might be climbing up these mountains. So people still take it quite seriously. So this theory that was put out by Peter Gilman back in 1989 that these photos were all fake, it actually hasn't been proven either. So they remain, as I said, a subject of fascination. And, those sort of reports of large footprints continue to recur throughout the 1950s. But of course, if anything sneak in through mainstream media, we also see those sort of stories become the fodder or inspiration for pop culture. So we also have this growth of horror films, Hammer Horror being a very famous film studio. They're putting out movies or schlocky horror films about the abominable snowman and the Yeti. We also have in 1960 a very well-known cartoon by Bugs Bunny about the abominable snowman. To actually make the Yeti the subject of a point of interest to gain public interest, to gain maybe some additional fundraising dollars. Yeah, it was a pop culture, there was a pop culture background to it that would make it sort of a very accessible way into some very complex science for.
I'm going to have to watch this movie. The poster you've put in for The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas, you say it's schlocky, but it's got Peter Cushing in it, a serious actor. So I'm expecting big things from that movie.
Vincent Price is also a good actor. Christopher Lee is also a good actor, but they also did these schlocky films. They weren't always great actors.
Challenge some of those shark movies.
Hey, don't knock my shark movies. I love a bad shark movie.
The one-headed shark, the two-headed shark. Like, did they keep going until how many heads?
Ouija board shark.
Yeah, so what they realised quite smartly with the headed shark attack was that four-headed shark attack doesn't sound very clever. So they skipped that one and went straight to the five-headed shark. And I think the five-headed shark does have four heads at the front, but it also has one head at the tail end, which is really, really stupid.
That's stupid. At least you've got standards.
Now, Hillary wasn't the only person in the Himalayas. Other people were trekking around. Other people were interested in trying to verify these reports of the Yeti. So various expedition teams were trying to obtain hair specimens because various temples across Tibet, these various temples would allegedly have Yeti scalps as part of their temple treasures. You had lots of people coming in trying to get possession of a Yeti scalp, possession of the hair that's on it, like the hair skin follicles, and get them tested. There's even in one temple what's called the pamphlet hand, and that's an artifact that's in a monastery of the same name, which looks like it like when you see the pictures of it, it looks kind of like a mummified primate hand. In reality, it's probably like a mix of human and, mostly human bones, maybe from a young woman or multiple bones from different people. But it's presented as a Yeti hand.
To me, because it's a fairly grainy black and white picture, it looks like an alien face hugger.
I found it difficult to try to find accurate color photos of what this hand would have looked like back in the day, because now one of the things that happened just maybe about a decade or so ago is that an ex-pilot, or a guy who was then a pilot at Air New Zealand and also a mountaineer, decided to go to Weta Studios and have them fabricate a fake version of a hand and of this particular Pangbok hand and of the scalp so that he can give it to that monastery as a gift. So like there are lots of photos, but sometimes it's not quite clear if that's the actual hand or if it's the fake hand being used to replicate like some older photos. I can't quite tell.
Right.
But anyways, there's a Texas oil magnate who was doing lots of tours and expeditions through the Himalayas through the late 1950s. He ended up securing some Yeti poop, and in 1958, he's able to get a piece of this hand, this Pangbok hand. The story is a little bit out of the Twilight Zone. It's alleged that this member of Slick's team, named Peter Byrne, got the monks drunk and then stole one of the fragments and replaced it with a human bone. And it's like, where did he get the human bone? Where did that come from? However, Peter Byrne, in more recent years, has been claiming that, no, I paid for this fragment and the monks let me take it. But the interesting part is that he takes this bone, he smuggles it to India, and then the actor Jimmy Stewart smuggles it to the UK, and it gets tested. And for anyone who doesn't know Peter Byrne's name, and I'd say many Kiwis won't, he's actually like one of the four horsemen of Sasquatches. I think that's what he's called. Like he is he's a well-known cryptozoologist, but this was sort of something he was involved with very early in his life. When Hillary comes on the scene in like 1960, he's trying to be quite deferential. He has this really good relationship with the Sherpa, with the various communities. And this is a relationship that's not only important to him personally, it's also important to the well-being of any expedition. Because there are people who are climbing alongside you, and they're going to be the difference between life and death. But also, I think Hillary also felt responsible for improving aspects of their life as well. So he was very differential to, the importance that the scalp and the artifacts had to the local Sherpa people, while trying to very publicly be like, no, I don't believe in the Yeti. So it was very difficult, I think, for him in these press releases or press meetings to try to hold that line.
And those two pictures you have in your article, the one of Hillary sitting on a desk with this big picture of a Yeti, and then the other one of him along with the Sherpa, and the two of them are both holding a supposed Yeti scalp. They're priceless. They are such good photos.
Mm-hmm. And in order to be able to get this scalp out of Tibet, he was able to make an arrangement with the local elders that, yes, they will let him take the scalp out of Tibet, but it has to be back within a month, and it must always be accompanied with a Sherpa. Like someone would have to accompany the skull wherever it went, because it would be tested in labs in Chicago, London, and somewhere else. And I guess that feels very progressive, I suppose. But maybe in the background, you're kind of thinking like, if these scalps are kind of really big moneymakers for these monasteries, that's a lot of money that a community could lose if people aren't able to look at a scalp and like do a little donation. And they'd asked Hillary, like, if you're going to take the scalp, can you build us a school? And that actually started the Himalayan Trust, which is still operational today and actually committed to improving education like schools and educational opportunities for the Sherpa communities in Tibet, which is kind of cool. But anyway, surprise, surprise, or no surprise at all, when genetic testing was actually done on these scalps, they kind of found that they were pretty much fabricated. Definitely fake, and likely made from the skin of a saru or suro, which is kind of like a goat-like or antelope-like animal that is pretty prominent throughout the Himalayas. Other versions of the scalps have been made with fur from like red pandas and other animals, and like bears that are local to the area. In terms of the expedition itself, like they weren't able to climb one mountain. They were able to climb a second mountain. There was lots of drama. People got sick. I think Pugh and Hillary had a falling out at one point. But the science was great. All the science, even from the Yeti debunking to this enduring evidence about how people who don't live in high altitudes can actually acclimatize and adapt to high altitude situations.
And the takeaway message here is that Sir Edmund Hillary went on a Yeti hunt, which is awesome.
And for all the skeptical things that I've written about, this was actually probably the one that had the most resources. Like, a lot of people like to talk about Sir Edmund Hillary's Yeti hunt because it's quite incongruent to the image that we have of Sir Edmund Hillary. But when you look deeper, there's actually a lot written about what did Hillary actually think of the Yeti. And I think there's some really interesting lessons available for skeptics as to maintaining, our strong scientific principles without making people feel that they're being insulted or exploited. And that's it for that. Now, for our final segment, I'm going to hand it over to Katrina. So Katrina, why are photos that were taken in the sky nearly 80 years ago stirring up the UFO community today?
Oh my gosh, yes. First, I'll just say no red pandas were harmed in the making of this pseudoscience, so can't say as much for the Yeti, but two reputable news sources, MSN and Daily Mail Online, both published an article by, I'm being sarcastic there about these news sources, a guy called Rob Walk, who is, a freelance journalist, and he used to be an investigative, he's a British journalist, not an American. He used to be an investigative journalist in the Yorkshire Post, and he has written a few things on skepticism. I can see he's been on a podcast about fake experts, and he was interviewed about that, downright lies and disinformation. So this is a bit disappointing, but if you go to his X profile, he calls himself as his byline the cockwomble of all journalists. So I guess the jury's out on who exactly this person is. But he has this headline, NASA scientist specs evidence of non-human intelligence in Earth's skies. So that's a pretty big deal, obviously, if NASA's saying we think we've found, something in our skies, whether that be, a spaceship, alien spaceship, or whether that's some kind of big black monolith floating around in space. So I had a bit of a look at that, and the article is, I won't say based on, but maybe inspired by an actual science article that was written. And look, there are astronomers out there that do have a look at little dots in the sky and whether those little stars or dots in the sky change over time. And I know when I was working in the observatory, it's someone that kept visiting there, I think, pretty sure it's Graham Wolf. I hope he's still around. Hi, Graham. And he did occultation. So who's looking patiently at stars to see whether they got dimmer or brighter or got blocked out by things like planets. And that's how you used to work out if there were planets there. What they're doing here is actually looking at the glass plates, because that's what photos used to be taken on through telescopes in the old days, and looking at the photo plates, pictures of stars from ages ago, and having a look at them and noticing that there were some flashes appearing and disappearing in those plates. So the dot's not there, it's there, and then it goes away. And so sometimes those flashes are caused by artifacts, imperfections in the plate or a bit of dust, that kind of thing. This particular piece of research went back and had a look at some old plates from Germany, and they appear to confirm some results that came out a while back from Palomar Observatory, which saw the same dots appearing and disappearing. And earlier, the outfit that found the earlier dots, called Vasco, had sort of speculated that there could be a number of causes for these, including the person that kind of runs the show there was sort of speculating that, well, these are consistent with light reflecting off a flat surface. And so then that kind of got out of control in terms of, well, flat surfaces, you don't find flat surfaces floating around in space. So maybe, there's some kind of alien technology out there. That's kind of where they got from these flashing dots. So flat rotating objects in orbit around Earth. And so you may have heard them called Palomar lights. That's a much sexier name than flashy dots. And so that is what this article is based on. So I went and had a look at the research paper, and blow me down, there's absolutely no mention of space aliens in that article, even alien technology there. That comment came from the earlier researcher. Name is gone. Beatrice Villarreal, and she is a citizen scientist for the Vasco, the earlier one. And she done what scientists quite often do, and they kind of speculate on all the possible causes for what they're seeing. And she didn't specifically say, this is a UFO out there. Vasco is not fundamentally a UFO project, but some of his findings have been discussed by other people in that context. So the researchers have been specifically looking at the short flashes and the old photographic records, so basically the same kind of thing that's been done recently, and that has led to speculation, which appears to have led to this article. So this is a really good example of someone getting a bit of a soundbite from someone else doing some research, and all the pieces being put together and coming up with space aliens, which is, I guess it could be one of the explanations, but the issue here is that if you're going to make an extraordinary claim, you need extraordinary evidence, and there are lots of other things that could cause flashes in the sky, and some of those are a lot more probable than alien technology in our sky. So one explanation is nuclear testing. So it happens that there were some nuclear tests going on in the 1950s, and these flashes appeared within 1 to 2 days of the nuclear testing. Now, I don't know what the mechanism could be for that. I had a bit of a poke around to try and work out what that is. But those transients were about 45% more likely to occur within a day of those nuclear tests. So there's something else that needs exploring. And whatever that is probably more likely than space aliens in our sky. Another explanation is just solar activity. That's something that's happening all the time. But when you get bursts of radiation coming out from the sun, like solar flares, so the big sun lava coming out into the sky, that interacts with our atmosphere. We see that sort of as aurora quite often if you see it at night. So we know that solar flares can create weird light effects, and it's possible it can create small weird light effects as well, or cause issues with photographic plates. High altitude balloons is another possibility, although I don't think you get the same shot from Germany as the Palomar Observatory for that one. And then you can have things like gamma rays and other things that are flashing in the sky. I talked about occultations, that sort of thing. Maybe something's unblocking something for a while. And also dust and radioactive contamination. But again, if you've got the two data points and that's solid, then it's less likely that it's going to be a anomaly in terms of or an artifact. It's the photographs. So I guess that is not looking too great for a spaceship in our skies. There's also a paper on this that was submitted earlier that got rejected, and this particular paper is preprint. So it's not a... So I guess what happens when you're publishing a research paper, what you can do is a preprint. So you make that paper available to everyone. But the issue is that it's been made available before it's gone through the peer review process, which is a really important part of research to test the validity of that. So that's when, you get feedback on whether your research is sound, basically, from a number of experts in the field. That hasn't happened. And now that's led directly to this news article confirming this earlier one. And even if this gets withdrawn or doesn't progress, it's out there now. And the news article's out there. And just like the previous time this exact same issue came up, it's just going to keep rearing its head and everything's going to be evidence for it. It's just going to keep reinforcing itself. So these ideas are interesting. It would be amazing if we had alien structures in our sky, and the fact that they haven't actually tried to destroy us yet may mean that they will be peaceful aliens, which would be great. I mean, that would be an amazing discovery. So I'm not anti-aliens, but I very much doubt that these alien structures in our sky until we get that extraordinary evidence to support the extraordinary claim that's been made. So I think it's just a tabloid taking legit research and kind of running away with it like crazy and blatantly misrepresenting the findings for a really great headline. And you can see the comments are just like, you should never read the comments. They are crazy. There's all sorts of people obviously have their own theories, and some are sort of shooting it down and saying, no, it clearly can't be base aliens. That's stupid. It's demons. So that kind of logic going on there.
Who's responsible for reading the comments on the Skeptics page? Is that also a don't read the comments situation?
We don't get many comments because we're always right. Everybody agrees with us. I think this is a real trap for skeptics because unlike things that are obviously pseudoscience and have to involve spirits or otherworldly things, in a way, this is sciencey based, right? The idea, especially if it's just like alien technology from millions of years ago that's been floating through the galaxy and happens to pass through our solar system. And I've written about Avi Loeb before and how every unusual thing that goes through the solar system, he goes, it's aliens. There's a real temptation for skeptics to believe this because we understand the Drake equation to extent, and we know that there will be alien civilizations, most likely elsewhere in the galaxy and definitely the universe. And I think a lot of skeptics have a problem where they have a tendency to let their guard down when it comes to stories like this and not apply the same skepticism because it's a good story and it's, wouldn't it be amazing if aliens were around? And because you want it to be true, you can find yourself being a lot less skeptical. And I've had to stop myself before when I've read some of these articles and you read the papers that are backing them and it's, that's so awesome. And then it's, no, I need to go and look for dissenting voices. I need to go and see what the rest of the scientific community is saying. And whenever I've done that for these things I really want to be true, the majority of science has been like, nope, this isn't a thing. It's much more like to be other things. This guy's being reckless by saying this. And it's a bit of a party pooper, but we are an at-risk community when it comes to these sciencey type topics of believing things prematurely.
But I think, just imagine, it would be so easy if you could just explain anything with aliens. If aliens is always the answer, then you already know everything. And aliens can always be the answer, no matter what situation you're facing. I'm sure there is a way to make aliens the answer to your question.
So you just replace God with aliens, and aliens did everything. Aliens made the platypus. That's why it's weird. They were experimenting.
Aliens stole my left stock.
Nice.
Aliens made the milk go off. It's all aliens.
Well, I think that has got an element of truth with it because you hear about these stories of people having sort of demons coming in their window and sitting on their chests, and then at some point that changed to aliens coming through the window and aliens, sitting on people's chests and, doing things to them. So I think that has kind of evolved. So you sort of end up with one pseudoscience taking over another one. But everyone, I don't know, maybe they just want magic. And it's also that kind of, what do they call it when you've got that thing that you can write yourself out of any awkward plot? These aliens are going to come and save us, and nothing will be as it is, so we don't need to solve all the problems we got now, because either they'll come and fix it or give us bigger problems and we don't need to worry about that.
It's really just science fiction versus fantasy. Magic versus aliens.
With one sentence there, Katrina, whole new can of worms. Like, you mentioned apocalypse and a chainsaw. In my mind, I'm immediately like, is a chainsaw a good weapon during the apocalypse? What is the best weapon? If an apocalypse happened now, and I was to go down to the local shopping mall and arm myself, what would I choose? Probably don't want a gun,
something
right?
that runs on diesel right now.
Yeah.
You've got to test that with Skeptics Challenge coming, with Mark's testing apocalypse weapons.
All right, we will bring this up at our Skeptics in the Pub meeting on Friday and see
You
if
gotta
we can
bring
get a
your chainsaw?
consensus on what is the best weapon. I know in like The Walking Dead, every main character in The Walking Dead had their own different favorite weapon, whether it was a baseball bat with the barbed wire around it, or an axe, or a rifle, or a pistol. I figured there's got to be something that works better than anything else. Maybe a javelin or
Depend on
something.
your aliens, because there's that movie where the aliens are scared of cochlear implants and the supposed feedback that comes
so
out
you're
of.
fine
So
then.
maybe everyone who's got hearing aids will be at an advantage, and they just kind of hold them out and make them squeal, and then that will be fine.
Oh, that was what, A Quiet Place?
I think they made a couple. And yeah, I've got a cochlear implant, but I can tell you part of it is they can't feedback. There's no sound. So it's all, the whole premise of the whole movie is screwed. But anyway.
You've ruined it for me. I
I'm
totally
so
believed
sorry.
it. Oh,
Please,
God.
please, if you get big scary aliens invade, please do not hold your hearing aid devices out to them.
I'm looking forward to the double-blind test procedure you'll come up with, Mark, to test the best apocalypse weapons.
Yeah, how do you do that ethically? This is going to be hard.
What, ethics? Ethics are part of skeptics? No. You've just got to get to the right conclusion. It's all that matters. Do you own a chainsaw, Mark?
My wife does. I'm not
You
the
have
gardening
saws.
type, but
You have saws that you play like a musical instrument, Mark.
yeah, I have a musical saw. My wife has an electric-driven, scary turny saw.
What's more dangerous, hearing you play the musical saw or being attacked with the saw? What would be the better weapon?
It might be that my musical saw playing is so bad that I would scare aliens away. Cochlear implant doesn't work, but my musical saw is the thing.
I'm converted. I believe you. Absolutely.
I remember in Venture Scouts once we made a splatter movie, and I was the one on the table while the chainsaw was being held above me by irresponsible teenage boys. And you know, you can feel that wind. It feels a lot closer than it actually is. And, you know, I just don't think your brain is well formed when you're a teenager, and you just don't make the best life decisions, I have to say. I think back on that, and every time I think of it, I'm like, that could have gone 100% so wrong. I'm lucky to be here today, I think.
Thank you for that piece, Katrina. Now, before we sign off for yet another fortnight, we have a brief membership corner. Next Wellington Skeptics in the Pub will be May 1st at 6 p.m. We are at the Intercontinental Hotel on 2 Gray Street. Lobby Lounge has gotten the facelift. We all have mixed opinions, but come see for yourself. And say hi to a dedicated group of skeptics and stay for some nice food and drink. Auckland Skeptics in the Pub, they will return to the Dyson Fork on May 5th at 6:30 p.m. And then finally for our annual conference that will be held in Christchurch from July 31st to August 2nd. Early bird tickets are still on sale, and they will continue to be available until the end of May. And then June 1st, it's going to be the standard ticket prices. So go to conference.skeptics.nz, and from there you can head on to the Humanitix website and get your weekend tickets at the second to last cheapest prices you can get them. And also just want to publicly thank Craig Shearer. He's given our conference page a lovely facelift. So we now have bios and pictures of the SGU. Saturday is all for the SGU. Sunday is for our New Zealand crew. And we'll be having an update coming up in the next month or so. Also, the SGU, they are hosting a private event on the evening of July 31st, which is the Friday. This ticket is not included in the weekend conference pass, so if you want those tickets, get in soon. They are limited in number, but you will need to buy them directly from the SGU. So head on to their website. If you have any comments, questions, queries, kudos, or concerns, please email us at news@skeptics.nz or podcast@skeptics.nz. And that's it. That's all for this episode of the Yeah Nah podcast. We'll be back with more skeptical news in a fortnight. Kakite.
Akite.
Thanks for having me again.
Great to have you, Aaron. See you.